At 6:37 a.m. on October 25, 1944, Rear Admiral Clifton Sprague looked through his binoculars and saw something no U.S. Navy commander would ever expect to see. On the horizon, emerging from the morning mist of Leyte Gulf, was the unmistakable silhouette of the Japanese super battleship Yamato. And it was not alone. 18 heavy cruisers, 11 destroyers, and 4 battleships, including the Yamato itself, the largest and most powerful warship ever built by humanity. Its main guns were 460 mm, capable of launching 1.5-ton shells at a distance of 42 kilometers. Against this, Sprague commanded 6 escort carriers, small and slow, nicknamed by the sailors themselves as tin cans or paper boats. They were not built for combat. They were built to die. The Japanese saw those carriers as easy targets, disposable ships that would be swept from the ocean in minutes. They mocked them over the radio. But what happened over the next 3 hours was so improbable, so absolutely impossible, that Japanese historians to this day debate whether it actually happened or if it was a collective illusion caused by panic. This is the story of the battle off Samar. The day's 6 paper ships faced the largest naval combat force ever assembled. And won. In October 1944, Japan was losing the war. The Philippines were about to fall, and with them, the oil routes from Indonesia. Without fuel, the Japanese fleet would be useless. Admiral Takeo Kurita received direct orders from the Imperial High Command. One last desperate blow. Operation Shogo. The plan was audacious to the point of madness. 3 Japanese fleets would converge on Leyte Gulf from different directions, splitting American forces. Kurita's fleet, the most powerful, would sail through the San Bernardino Strait, surprise the Americans from the rear, and destroy the unprotected troop transports on the beach. Hundreds of ships loaded with American soldiers would be sunk. Thousands of men would die. But there was a problem. To get there, Kurita's fleet had to cross the Sibuyan Sea, a zone completely exposed to American air attacks. And that is exactly what happened. On October 24th, Kurita's fleet was attacked by 259 American aircraft. The super battleship Musashi, Yamato's sister, was hit by 19 torpedoes and 17 bombs. It sank slowly, taking 1,023 men to the bottom of the ocean. Kurita ordered a retreat. The Americans celebrated, believing the battle was won. But at nightfall, something strange happened. Kurita's fleet turned east again. Kurita had not given up. He just waited for it to get dark. At 11 p.m., the Japanese fleet crossed the San Bernardino Strait undetected. There were no American ships waiting for them. None. Admiral William Halsey, commander of the American Third Fleet, had fallen into a trap. A decoy Japanese fleet, commanded by Admiral Ozawa, lured Halsey north with empty carriers, without planes. Halsey took the bait and took all his battleships with him, leaving Leyte Gulf completely unprotected. That night, Kurita sailed freely through Philippine waters. At 6:30 a.m. the next morning, he spotted smoke on the horizon. American ships. Vulnerable. Defenseless. Kurita smiled. Finally, revenge. Rear Admiral Clifton Sprague commanded Taffy 3, a unit of 6 escort carriers and 7 destroyers. Escort carriers were hastily built ships, with converted merchant ship hulls. Their top speed was 17 knots, while Japanese battleships could reach 27 knots. Their armor was thin. Their weapons, ridiculous. 127mm guns against 410mm armor. When Sprague saw Kurita's fleet, he sent an urgent message to Admiral Halsey. Under attack by heavy surface force. My situation is critical. Halsey was 500 kilometers away. He wouldn't arrive in time. Sprague was alone. The only chance of survival was to flee. Sprague ordered the carriers to turn east and accelerate to the maximum, while the destroyers laid smoke screens to hide the larger ships. But the Japanese were fast. Very fast. At 7:01 a.m., the Yamato opened fire. Its 460mm guns fired shells that fell like meteors around the American carriers. 60-meter-high water columns exploded around the USS Fanshawe Bay. One shell passed through the deck of the carrier Kalinin Bay without exploding. Had it exploded, the ship would have been destroyed instantly. But the shell was too big. It passed straight through, creating a 2-meter diameter hole. The sailors looked at the hole, incredulous. They were alive by pure luck. Sprague knew he couldn't run. The Japanese were too fast. So he did something no military manual would recommend. He attacked. Sprague ordered his destroyers, tiny ships with limited torpedoes, to attack the Japanese battleships directly. It was suicide. And everyone knew it. Commander Ernest Evans of the destroyer USS Johnston did not hesitate. He turned the ship directly toward the Yamato and accelerated at full speed. His crew fell silent, knowing they would likely die in the next few minutes. But Evans shouted over the intercom, "This will be a fighting fight. All hands to their stations." At 7:10 a.m., the Johnston fired its torpedoes at the heavy cruiser Kumano. A torpedo hit the bow of the Japanese ship, blowing off 12 meters of structure. The Kumano fell out of formation, flooded and in flames. But now the Johnston was the target of the entire Japanese fleet. 203 mm, 356 mm, and even 460 mm shells fell around the small destroyer. A salvo of 356 mm shells hit the Johnston. The bridge was destroyed. Commander Evans lost 2 fingers and was covered in shrapnel. But he refused to relinquish command. Bloodied, he continued giving orders as the ship burned. The destroyer USS Hull joined the attack. It fired all its torpedoes at the Japanese battleships and continued fighting even after being hit more than 40 times. Its hull was so damaged that water was pouring in from everywhere, but the guns kept firing. And then something extraordinary happened. The escort carriers, those paper boats, began to fight back. Planes took off without proper weapons. Some pilots attacked Japanese cruisers with depth charges, weapons designed for submarines, not surface ships. Others made strafing runs without ammunition, just to distract the Japanese gunners. Pilot Thomas Lupo made 7 attack runs without a single bomb. He just dived over the Japanese ships, forcing them to swerve and break formation. When asked later why he risked his life without weapons, he replied, "Because my friends were dying down there." By 8:30 a.m., the situation was catastrophic for the Americans. The carrier USS Gambier Bay was surrounded by Japanese cruisers just 10,000 meters away. 203 mm shells pierced its thin hull like paper. At 9:07 a.m., the Gambier Bay capsized and sank. It was the only American carrier lost in surface combat during the entire Second World War. The destroyer USS Hull was sinking. The USS Johnston was in flames, with over 60% of its crew dead or wounded. The USS Samuel B. Roberts, an even smaller destroyer escort, was hit by 356 mm shells and snapped in half. Sprague sent another desperate message to Halsey. "Where are the battleships?" Situation critical. Halsey was far away. Very far. And then, at 9:11 a.m., something impossible happened. The Japanese fleet turned north and began to withdraw. Kurita ordered a general retreat. The Americans couldn't believe it. The Japanese were winning. Why stop now? The truth is that Kurita was confused. He expected to find defenseless troop transports, but he found carriers and destroyers fighting with a ferocity he had never seen. The constant air attacks, torpedoes coming from all directions, the smoke, the chaos. Kurita believed he was facing the main force of the American fleet, not 6 escort carriers. Conflicting reports were coming from all sides. His cruisers reported large carriers. His destroyers reported massive air attacks. The Japanese formation was broken, with ships scattered for miles. Kurita didn't know how many ships he had lost. He didn't know where the enemy was. He only knew he was under constant attack. And so he made the decision. He withdrew. The largest naval combat fleet ever assembled by Japan turned its back and fled from 6 paper ships. When Kurita returned to Japan, he was interrogated for hours. "Why did you retreat?" Kurita didn't have a clear answer. He just said, "I believed I was facing the main fleet. I was wrong." But the truth was simpler. He had underestimated American courage. He had mocked the paper boats. And he paid for it with the greatest naval defeat in Japanese history. When the battle ended, Taffy 3 had lost 2 escort carriers, 2 destroyers, and 1 destroyer escort. More than 1,500 men died. But they had saved Leyte Gulf. They had prevented the massacre of thousands of American soldiers on the beaches. They had defeated Japan's greatest war fleet. Commander Ernest Evans was last seen on the bridge of the USS Johnston, still giving orders as the ship went down. He was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor. The destroyer USS Hull sank with the American flag still flying. The USS Samuel B. Roberts, nicknamed Sammy B., fought with such ferocity that Admiral Kurita believed he was facing a heavy cruiser. Of the survivors, many spent days floating in the ocean before being rescued. They watched their friends die from wounds, drowning, and shark attacks. But they survived. And they won. The Battle off Samar is considered by naval historians as the greatest improbable victory in modern history. Samuel Eliot Morison, the official historian of the U.S. Navy, wrote, "In no other naval action in history has such courage, sacrifice, and determination been shown against impossible odds." Here at Segredos de Guerra, we believe that the greatest battles are not won by those with the biggest weapons, but by those who refuse to give up when all seems lost. And the Battle of Samar proves exactly that. 6 paper ships, 18 cruisers, a super battleship that even the Americans considered indestructible. And in the end, it was the paper boats that prevailed, not because they were stronger, but because they refused to accept defeat as inevitable. What sets this story apart from so many others you've heard is simple. Kurita had every advantage. Superior firepower, superior speed, superior armor. He should have won in minutes. But he underestimated the one factor no military manual can teach: the human will to protect those who depend on you. Sprague and his men knew that behind them, on the beaches of Leyte, were tens of thousands of defenseless American soldiers. If Kurita's fleet reached them, it would be a massacre. So they didn't run. They attacked, even knowing they would likely die. And that is why this battle matters. Not for the numbers, not for the statistics, but because it reminds us that courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is doing what needs to be done, even when all the odds are against you. If you enjoyed this story and want to know more secrets of the greatest battles in history, subscribe to the Segredos de Guerra channel and hit the bell so you don't miss any episodes. Leave your like, share it with those who truly love history, and tell us in the comments, which battle do you want us to tell next? Because here, we don't just tell stories. We reveal the secrets that changed the world. Until the next battle.